Hey, I'm Riley, and this is the Superhuman Podcast. That's Superhuman. We bring you cutting edge insights from health experts and high performers to help you unlock your body's full potential, supercharge your mind, and achieve more with less effort. Want to fix nagging health issues, boost productivity, spark genius ideas, master stress, build better relationships, and increase your income? It all starts with optimizing your inner machinery. My guest today is Andrew Horn. Andrew is a serial entrepreneur, leadership coach, and speaker dedicated to helping people build meaningful relationships and lead with impact. He's the founder of Tribute.co, called Hallmark 2.0 by The New Yorker, and has helped millions express gratitude through group video montages. He's advised CEOs of top startups like Casper, Hinge, and Tom's, and his relational leadership framework teaches leaders how to master communication and build thriving teams. A TED speaker, he has shared his insights at the United Nations, Fortune 500 companies, and global conferences. When he's not coaching, speaking, or hosting his podcast, What's the Big Idea? You'll find him surfing in Costa Rica and spending time with his family. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Riley. So you said Costa Rica. Does that mean that you're Canadian or you just go soft?
I guess it means, yeah. I should have said A after that.
Awesome. Excited to be here, Riley.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you on. And I love people who have started many different ventures, sort of polymaths in some ways. And they all have their origin story. And for you, how did this entrepreneurial journey start for you? Was it when you were a kid doing a paper route? Was it a little bit later? How did that all happen?
So we started this conversation before we were recording saying that you're actually in Maui, Hawaii right now, very close to where I grew up, only a few minutes away. And the origin story of really all of the significant businesses I've created kind of trace back to me being in Maui when I was 13 years old, not far away from you are, Lokalani Intermediate. And ultimately, I was just a shy, introverted, really lonely kid. And I was able to move away from Hawaii to Washington, D.C. when I was 14. And I remember when I moved, I just had this awareness of how unhappy I was not having meaningful relationships, like having so much difficulty expressing myself confidently. So around that age is when I just started to study things like, how to win friends and influence people and read books.
Sure.
And I have a mom who's an author who, talks about interpersonal dynamics and effective communication. And so I got curious about, well, how do I communicate more effectively? How do I pick up girls and how do I build friendships? I started to do those things in my early teens, and I started to do that through college. And I started my first company when I was 21 and gave my first TEDx talk when I was 22. But what happened and what I became present to was this reality that even though I was building companies and raising capital and finding some success with women and building community and friendships, that part of me on the inside that was always contracted, that was so nervous, that felt that I wasn't good enough, that felt like people didn't really know the real me, just never went away, no matter how much external success I built. And so, when I look at all the businesses that I've created, there's this underlying theme of human connection and meaningful communication. And how do we help people to do those two things? And so whether it's Tribute and helping people to share their appreciation, to connect more deeply, whether it was Dreams for Kids, my first nonprofit, and helping kids with disabilities to use sports to build meaningful community and connection with their peers, all the way through now my executive coaching and retreats business, which is working with CEOs and executives around the world to help them to be more authentic and effective and, build high performing, low drama teams. But at the core of it is human connection and meaningful communication.
That's so amazing. And I mean, that's kind of what, after 2020 with COVID and everything, that's what the world's turned into. I mean, we need more of this human connection. We don't have that. Things can start to fall apart for us. So was it through your own journey? You said you felt like you were missing a lot of these things despite all the external success. Was it when you started helping other people that you sort of found that yourself?
I think that I realized at an early age that more than anything else, I craved human connection. But what was unfortunate on my path, or just really a part of the learning, is that I started to rely so heavily on external validation to build those connections. It's like, okay, what's the best question that I can ask to help someone to feel connected to me and like they like me? How can I package what it is that I'm saying to do the right thing? And so I learned the surface level techniques and tactics of how to communicate effectively. And while that was helpful for achieving and creating success in business, it didn't create what I would call real intimacy. And there's a difference between connection and intimacy, right? Like we can be connected with someone and feel like they don't really get us, right? We can still be in a massive community and feel alone. And so intimacy is when we feel truly seen and understood by someone. And for me, where that part of my journey really started to develop was when I was around 27 years old. And at this time, I was the CEO of Tribute. this incredible company that's built millions of collaborative video montages that people give as gifts all around the world, tribute.co.
Amazing.
And I was running this company and I got invited to go to this training in a modality called Gestalt Communication Protocol. And basically the facilitator, when we get into this retreat, he says, all right, I'm going to invite you to embrace 3 pillars of awareness while we're here. Number 1, authenticity. Number 2, curiosity. Number 3, presence. And then he breaks that down. He said, embrace your thoughts and feelings as real and valid and deserving of a voice. Just say what you're thinking and feeling. Curiosity. Trust your curiosity as a compass for connection. So when you have a question, ask it. And then he says, in presence, just want you to be fully here, like not in some prediction about what the future holds or who you are from the past. And he said, if you just do those 3 things, you're going to have a really powerful experience. And I was like, okay, let's try that on. And so there was this experience at the first break where there was a woman there who most of the executives there in their 40s and 50s, I was in my late 20s at the time. And there was an entrepreneur there who had created this really beautiful media company, super successful. And I've been trying to make inroads with her. But as I was asking her questions, and most of us, I think, can empathize with a situation where you're asking someone a question and they're kind of looking around the room, they're looking at the door, they're giving you shorter answers. And my pattern is like, okay, now I get into my head. She's not interested in me. She doesn't think I'm cool enough. She doesn't want to hang out. And so I noticed that now I'm starting to withdraw. And at the first break, I'm at the coffee machine and I see this woman walking up to me. And I thought about what the facilitator said, totally authentic, whatever you're thinking and feeling. And so she walks over and I was like, hey, Megan, can I share something with you? Do you have a minute? And she's like, yeah, sure. And I was like, hey, I just want to say that I really appreciate what you've built. Super cool. And also wanted to share that I've been trying to ask you questions and I haven't really felt you reciprocating. And I want to let you know that's totally all good. And I'm going to stop. And so if you ever want to connect while we're here, just come up and like, let me know and I'd be happy to chat. And so there's about like a 3-second count, 1, 2, 3. And then guess what she does next?
She says, let's talk.
She starts crying right in front of me. And then I'm like, shit, this authenticity stuff is bullshit. This is not the optimal outcome. This is not what I wanted. But then she proceeds to open up and she says, Andrew, this is the last place on the planet that I want to be right now. My co-founder's suing me. My boyfriend and I are breaking up. I don't want to be here at all. And that's when it's almost like the last scene of Matrix 1, when Neo sees the green lines of the Matrix and what was the guy's name? Agent, what was his name? I forget his name, but he sees the agent. And I realized that I saw the lines of my reality, that my anxiety wasn't the response of like what Megan had said or done. It was the response to my story about what was happening, about her not being interested in me, about me not being smart enough. And I immediately realized that I was doing this in every single relationship in my life, that I wasn't responding to them as they are, is that I was interacting with my story that I had made up about what's safe to share, what I have to talk about for other people to like me, for women to be interested for me, for investors to think that my company's interesting. And it was my story of reality that kept me locked in this contraction and this anxiety. And there was a moment when we walked back into that room where everything really shifted for me to an even deeper level, where we got back in there and facilitator says, does anyone have anything that they'd like to share? Megan stands up. She's like, yeah, I would. She stands up and she's like, hey, I don't want to be here. My co-founder's suing me. Boyfriend's breaking up with me. This is the last place I want to be on the planet. The facilitator, being very well versed in this modality, he's like, great, knows how to welcome everything. Anyone else have anything that they'd like to share? Someone else stands up and they're like, I work at a bank. Like, this is way too touchy-feely. This is never going to work there. I don't really get the value of this. The other person gets up and like, yeah, I actually don't even understand, the whole point of this or like how this is going to impact my life. And so it was in that moment where I realized that me sharing the thing that I was worried about, sharing the thing that I thought could get me judged or rejected, was the exact thing that created space for Megan to share the thing that she was afraid to share, that she was experiencing, which then in turn created space for the other person to share the confusion that they weren't comfortable sharing. And so that was the first time that I really was able to connect with and embrace my authenticity as an act of service that creates space for other people to do the exact same thing. And what I realized is that my very human kind of instinct to be liked by other people was there and makes sense. But even more than I want to be liked by people, like even talking to you, Riley, what I want more than you to like me is I just want you to feel like you can be completely yourself and share whatever's real for you. And for me to create the type of space where that's possible, the only ethical way to really do that is to tell the truth and to be honest. And then I started to look at like, oh, wow, what I really want is like this feeling of being completely authentic in myself. I want to be fully known. And then I started to ask myself, like, okay, well, I don't want to say the right thing. I want to understand how to say the real thing masterfully. How do we tell the truth in a way that opens up relationships, that gets people to feel more comfortable
Mhm.
and connected to us? Like, how do we start to embrace authenticity that's actually effective? And that became the whole arc of kind of my career and leadership journey, and where things really started to open up in all sorts of beautiful ways.
Wow, that's beautiful. What a story and a chain reaction of what you were holding back for yourself and you were creating that spark for other people and seeing that in real time. I think you're right. That's really the ultimate red pill and seeing the matrix of what's really behind the curtain of reality, right?
Totally. Yeah.
You just think of like everyone's sort of stuck in that modality. And in the same way that being in your head could help you build a business as an entrepreneur, being introverted in some ways, that might not help you with other things. So being dynamic, and I've heard that quote, like the more universal it is. So you think, well, it's just me, but everyone's struggling with the same thing. And you just open it up and seeing that too. So no, I think that's amazing. And this is like you define relational leadership. And this is this sort of where all this stems from as well.
Yeah. So to me, I think of relational leadership as almost like a life path. So relational leadership to me is deciding to become the best version of ourselves by creating healthy relationships. And so it's this idea that if we were to commit to all of our important relationships, from mom and dad to romantic partner to our coworkers, co-founders, you name it, but that if we were committed to getting all of those relationships into a place of 9 or 10 out of 10 on a scale, totally healthy and clear, that we will be forced to become the best version of ourselves. And if you just look at the ingredients of a rewarding life, it's strong relationships are what keep us healthy and happy. And then when you look at leadership and running a company, like at the end of the day, it's like most problems are just people problems. Being the right people in the right seats, being able to diffuse conflict, like setting the container for people to collaborate. And so if our relationships are operating at full steam, our life is typically operating at full steam. And so relational leadership basically packages some of the essential skills that people can master to create healthy relationship in their personal and professional lives. And so, happy to talk about a few of those because they're very tactile and pragmatic. And like once we, step onto this pathway of like, okay, I want to be myself and I understand that that's really important. But then also, like, I want to create cool things in the world. I want to
Yeah.
start a podcast. I want to raise capital. And so, how do I be myself and lead powerfully? And that's what these skills are really created to do. And I always contextualize a little bit there of like what's so important about being ourselves. And you could create success in the world by being an asshole and by suppressing your needs and manipulating people. And there's a lot of examples that can be pretty easily found if you just like troll a newsfeed a little bit these days. But when I look at what I'm passionate about creating for my clients and all people is success and fulfillment. Like if
Yeah.
you're not fulfilled, if you don't feel fulfilled in your relationships in your life, what's the value of 10, 100, $1 billion in the bank account? And so if we want to be fulfilled, like I really do think there's this cornerstone of being really known, being ourselves. And there's a book called The 5 Regrets of the Dying by a woman named Bonnie Ware. And if you were to guess what the number one regret of the dying is, what would you say it is?
Is probably spending more people or spending more time with the people that you love or saying things to people that you didn't get the chance to, like something along those lines.
So spending more time with the people we love, I think is number 2 or number 3. So you're close, but
Okay.
number 1 is literally, I wish I had lived a life that was more authentic and true to myself. Is that I wish I was more authentic and true to myself. The number one regret of the dying. And so when we look at, okay, well then, if that's a number one regret of the dying, how can I anchor into that way of being, but then learn and layer the tools on top of it that help me to be really effective? And so,
No kidding.
some of those skills that we introduce are intentionality, introspection, curiosity, authenticity with objectivity, and presence. And so if you were to master those 5, like all built around these like very practical questions of intentionality, how do I want to be? Introspection, what am I thinking and feeling? Curiosity, what do I want to know? Authenticity with objectivity, what is real for me now? And then now for presence, which is just like, how can I be more present in this moment? And like those
I
5
love that.
questions will orient you towards this intrinsic way of being in any given situation. and give you a pathway towards like meaningful action.
It's so interesting how it starts with the individual, and from there, teams can really thrive because if all individuals, at scale can adopt that, I think that's amazing. And how much of this relates to people's individual trauma, like from their past and childhood, trying to fill that hole with external success? Because what I really like what you're saying here is, and to backtrack here, I work with a lot of people who want peak performance. Think Brian
Yeah.
Johnson, CEOs. They want the top 1% in everything. They look at their Oring scores, and it's great, and you can really achieve those things. But the thing that's missing sometimes is this trauma or things that they've been neglecting for so much time. But once they address it, it's just like the weight comes off their shoulders, then they can finally just relax. And with that, it seems that there's less weight that they have to carry around. So those relationships can just be a lot more meaningful, more effortless without them trying as hard. Have you noticed that too?
Yeah, totally. And, I think that comes down to that analogy that I gave before about the matrix, right? And that like so much of what is motivating us is unconscious, and they are fears, shame, emotions that we picked up early in childhood that we have never really engaged or integrated. And so what happens, this is why I say one of the core skills of relational leadership is introspection. And introspection is literally the ability to inspect our thoughts and feelings. And what happens, it's to respond consciously to life. It's typically more so our context, how we're relating to the situation, our thoughts and feelings, versus the content of what has happened or been said that impacts our ability to respond to it. So like what you just talked about there, like how much of this is early childhood trauma and other things, it's fundamentally, it's people's lack of ability or capacity to consciously feel their feelings and integrate them consciously. And so people have things that they experienced when they were younger. Like for me, I was really lonely. So I kind of over rotated and built this survival strategy of, okay, well, I need to be liked by everyone. So I need to watch what I say and not be weak and be popular because these are the things I need to say so that people will like me. And that survival strategy helps me for some long until it's now keeping me from actually being honest because I'm so fearful of being judged that I can't tell people the challenging things that I'm experiencing. Right. And same thing. It's like you have the person who saw their parents struggling financially. And so they build this kind of fear strategy of like, I will never not have money. I will do whatever it takes to be successful. And then now, they're a multimillionaire and super successful and rationally they're safe. But at the same time, they can't turn off this survival strategy that they picked up when they were 10, telling them that they're not safe. They don't have enough. Right. And so they keep acting into that reality, neglecting relationships, you name it. And so to become fully free, you could have all the money in the world and have external freedom and do what you want, go where you want. But what's just as valuable is internal freedom, which is the ability and the skill to welcome in everything that we're feeling and to really integrate that consciously. Because for so many of us, we're just beholden to the emotions that we're feeling, the thoughts and stories that they kind of project into our mind, and we're just reacting to them unconsciously. And so the ability to really feel our feelings, to check our thoughts and our stories and integrate them is an incredibly valuable skill.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because you don't hear people talking about the external as much as it is the external because everyone's trying to promote their business. Look how much freedom I have. I'm in Dubai with my Bugatti or whatever that is. But I think the next level of freedom is when you have that internal level. And not to say that's going to be the next status flex, but I think that's one thing that more people need to talk about because you meet these people, they give a talk, you're on a sales call, and you just come across as way more authentic. It's sort of that je ne sais quoi or that invisible energy that people have that you don't know how they do it, but just things always seem to go their way. And I think that's how it manifests from inside out.
Yeah, totally. And I'm fortunate, I have a window into the lives of people who are hyper successful. And it's like, I can tell you without, question of a doubt that money doesn't solve all of our problems. Does it present like some form of security materially? Like absolutely. But also it's like, I know a lot of billionaires who have daddy issues and, still fighting with their wife and going through challenging issues with their kids. It is certainly something to be appreciated and to want to cultivate. Money and economic freedom is great, but it's just not it's not a one all solution. And oftentimes we want to convince ourselves that it is. There's a great line, I think, in a Rolling Stone song. It says, everyone says money can't buy happiness, but I want to find out for myself. And I've always loved that. It's that, everyone thinks that money's going to solve their problems and it's not. And so that's why I say, hey, making money is great. I love making money. But what if rather than making money being the goal, we just oriented on, well, what if I commit to being the most effective leader in my business of building healthy relationships with everyone from my executive assistant to my co-founders, where all those relationships are thriving, clear, healthy. And if I were to do that, would I have the fulfillment of meaningful connection while I'm on the path to creating external or economic abundance? And so it's this idea of just like, what are we really focusing on, and what's going to give us the feeling that we're truly after while we're building, while we're out creating
Yeah.
success in the world.
That's interesting because we think we have to be doing one or the other, but you could be doing both at the same time. Like people think you just have to go 100% monk mode, focus on your business, lock in, don't tell anybody, like neglect friends, family, and all those things. And then the business is done. And now I can focus on some of the personal stuff. But it's, if you were to tell somebody from scratch, starting a business, maybe they're in a 9 to 5, and they want to start that business, of course you need that execution mode working, 60 to
Totally.
100 hours a week for a period of time. How would you suggest to integrate everything you just talked about while trying to balance the hustle mode too?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that I think a lot about. I do a mastermind with 12 CEOs, and we meet every couple of weeks. And one of the conversations we were talking about last night was what we call dirty fuel. And dirty fuel is just that, where you lock in, you're neglecting relationships, you're neglecting health, but you are just full sending it. And I don't think that all stress is bad stress. You can certainly kind of take on big projects and meaningful assignments that are going to push you to your limits. What you don't want is sustained stress. And dirty fuel, while motivational, to be afraid that things are going to fall apart, that you're not going to have enough money, like living with that level of fear for extended periods of time, it will be effective for a short amount of time. And if you're operating from that way as a leader, like you're going to get people who are going to obey what it is that you're saying, but you're not going to build real loyalty or people who care about you. And so it's this idea that dirty fuel, operating from this place of fear, it works for a short amount of time. But what I would say is much more rewarding and more valuable in the long term is learning how to motivate yourself more from these other places of service, of being really clear about why you're building and who you're building for, operating from a place of creativity and passion, building things that are intrinsically rewarding and meaningful for you, right? Optimizing for relational health, of building really meaningful relationships and taking care of those people. So you build true loyalty with people who want to stay with you over the long haul. And so those are a couple ways that we look at. It's like, how can I motivate from a different place than fear and threat? And as we start to motivate from that place, again, like people naturally want to work with us, and you can create urgency without the constant fear of threat and failure and so much else. And so that's what I often encourage people to do there, is to think of like, well, where else can I create that next level of motivation without going to that fear threat place, which is just most accessible. And, Jax is full of adrenaline and like, we'll do the work, but then also you got to take off the next week because you're drained
burned
and you
out.
didn't talk to anybody. Yeah, totally.
Burn the candle from both ends. And it's a lot of push energy instead of pull energy. And when you have more of that pull energy marketing, people come to you instead of you trying to frantically using that dirty fuel to try and get out to them. And it reminds me a lot of the book I recently read. It was called Effortless by Greg McEwen. He was the same guy that did Essentialism. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend, but it follows a lot of those same principles. Like, we can make this effortless. Like, building a business doesn't have to be hustle mode, hard mode. In some ways, yes, but it's that clean fuel that we use, and things can just fall into our lap a lot easier than we think. We don't have to be brainwashed to hustle and sacrifice our health. Like, that's not the only way. There's other ways. And I think as we have more conversations like these, people are just gonna, that level of awareness is that'll be the new baseline.
Yeah, totally, man. Couldn't agree more.
What do you notice with these unicorn entrepreneurs? Do they follow the same type of strategies as well?
It really does just differ. There are different models, and like obviously the most visible would be Elon Musk, who leaves with an iron fist and dictatorial and has been incredibly effective in creating what he's creating. And I get a lot of entrepreneurs that I talk to who use him as their benchmark. And what I say to them is like, okay, so number one, like you're comparing yourself to a neurodivergent kind of rocket scientist who is tapped into the belief that what he's working on is a direct kind of counterpoint to the existential extinction of the human race. So it's like, is what you're working on that existential? Like that, what he's doing, and like he's sacrificing for literally what he believes to be the extinction of the human race. So it's like, is that the paradigm that you're operating in? Because if what you were doing were to fail, would the human race go extinct? And if not, your risk calculation is just not going to be on par with what Elon's working on most times. And like what I also say, it's like, look at his relationships, right? He's had 13 wives and, he's estranged from kids. And it's like, so it's like, are you willing to take that type of stand to risk those types of relationships in that way? And again, I don't say this from a place that is judgmental, because when you look at what he has created, he has had a bigger impact on the world than any entrepreneur of our generation and potentially any generation. And so is a net good force for humanity. I think that that's pretty undeniable, even though he's a very controversial figure. And so that is one way to lead. But there are also so many other examples of other entrepreneurs leading in different ways. Of like, you have Sam Altman, who's battling with Elon Musk and who's like very conscious in how he navigates Elon Musk being kind of like very ostentatious and critical and judgmental. And Sam Altman's out here meditating and like building from a place of like deep purpose and conviction, and also detached from the outcome in like a really healthy way. And so you've got Yvon Chouinard and Patagonia and like so many CEOs who have built multi-billion-dollar companies with an emphasis on well-being. And so the question should never be like, do I have to be like this guy? Because it's like, there are so many other benchmarks and models of what it is like to lead from a compassionate place. And ultimately, we just have to ask ourselves, like, which is more aligned for me? What feels more ethical and aligned with my own values? And then that's the one that you're going to want to commit to, because that's the one that's going to feel good, where you're going to have sustainable motivation for the long term. And again, if you're just relying on that dirty fuel of fear and threat, you're going to wear yourself and everyone else around you out.
Amazing. I think it's great. We leave it off on that. Very well said. Thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it. If people want to learn more about you, where can they visit?
Easiest way is my personal website, itsandrewhorn.com. That's my handle on most social networks. If you want to give someone you care about a really meaningful gift, I've got a company called tribute.co. Give a group video montage for a birthday, graduation, you name it. And if you're a male CEO founder who's curious about personal growth, come join us at one of these quarterly retreats we do around the US at the Junto, wejunto.com.
Love it, Andrew. Thank you so much for coming on today. And all right, guys, thank you for tuning in. I hope you got a ton of value from today's episode. If you would like to take your health performance to the next level, grab our free Superhuman guide at getsuperhuman.io. Hit subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and I'll see you in the next episode. Stay superhuman.